these are some paintings that I did. And this is a dress that I made from those paintings. And today I'm going to show you how I did it. From painting to Photoshop to upside down zippers, this is how I turned a painting into a dress. So this whole thing really goes back to how badly I've wanted to design my own border print. Border prints are really special. They need to be printed differently than regular patterns, so finding them in the wild is pretty uncommon. Nowadays, they're sort of only popular in Japanese fashion, notably Lolita fashion. But making my own would mean I would need to find a place that could print that way and pay to get it custom printed. This project was sponsored by Spoonflower. Okay, I don't actually have an ad read because they didn't sponsor this video. They sponsored this project. Let me tell you what happened. At the start of February, I got an email. Spoonflower was looking for a couple cosplayers to utilize their service for cosplays for a blog post. But I had a couple things to worry about. Because this was for Spoonflower's official blog, they didn't want to use any copyrighted characters' names, and I didn't really know what to do. Because I really wanted to make something that was a reference to something I really love, but nothing on the prints could be copyright material. And then I turned to an artistic skill that I'm decent at: oil painting. If I could do an oil painted landscape based on a place from one of my favorite games, it would make a pretty dress and it would be copyright approved. And so I came up with this. A forest of fairies for a forest fairy cosplay, because what's more generic than a forest fairy? And when put onto the border print, it would look like an endless woods that you'd probably get lost in. But there was another problem. I needed to act fast. They were asking for designs by the end of the week. And not only is that not a lot of time to prepare, I didn't even know if they would approve of the print. But I had to take a risk, so I got painting. I'd like to be able to say that I can paint because I have an art degree, but I didn't take painting in college. I'm a student of a man who needs no introduction.
Hi, welcome back. Certainly glad you could join us today.
The style of painting Bob Ross used was actually called alla prima, which is Italian for first attempt. It's a technique where you use wet paint on an already wet canvas. Oil paint takes a really long time to dry, so using it while wet means you can really easily move it around the canvas, meaning there's lots of room for happy accidents. But it's been a long time since I did an oil painting, so I went searching for a Joy of Painting episode that had a painting similar to the one I was trying to make. And there were a couple good contenders, but season 28 episode 4's Golden Rays of Sunshine stood out among the rest. In this one, Bob starts a painting in gesso and then colors it in oil paint. And I was a little unsure about this because I've never tried to paint trees in acrylic. And if you don't know, acrylic paint works really differently than oil paint. Then our boy said this.
It is so simple that even if you've never painted, you can do this one, guarantee.
And that made me really believe in myself. So I went for it and I got started with the acrylic. The first steps of this painting were smacking the canvas with a paper towel. And that was easy enough. But then came the part I was scared of, the acrylic paint trees, and I really struggled with these at first. I didn't even have the same brush that Bob used in the episode, but after I watered down the acrylic paint, that helped a lot. This next part is what Bob calls a bravery test. Now, I wanted a stump as the centerpiece for one of these, but I've never painted a stump, so I was scared it would look terrible. And guess what? It did look terrible, but I got to cover it up with some bushes, and that was fine. But I had 2 black and white acrylic paintings, and I actually really like how they look in black and white. And I just had to wait for tomorrow to really bring them to life with the oil paint and color. It is almost a joke how easy the oil paint part of this, I mean, just look. It just glides right on. The wet on wet technique really shines with this because you just color the whole painting so fast. Though I did have one more bravery test with the light sources. The first one I did sort of the same way he does in the episode where the light is coming through the forest, but for the stump, I wanted a light source coming down onto the stump. And I didn't really know how to do that, and I was really scared it would look bad. Woo, that was scary. I didn't think that would look good. Okay, now I might ruin it. But I ended up really liking how that one turned out. My paintings were finished, but I was still running out of time because now I needed to get these photographed and get them into Photoshop. I'm gonna skip over a lot of the technical Photoshop jargon because this video is gonna be long enough. But after doing some basic color on the photos, I needed to first create the repeating pattern. So I copied and reflected the pictures a few times and then blended all the edges together with the clone stamp tool. It needed to be a little taller though, so it would fit the entire skirt, so I warped the top section upward with the warp tool. Then it needed the fairies. Originally I was just going to paint the fairies, but I'm not super confident in painting perfectly randomized glowing orbs, so I relied on a scattered Photoshop brush and the glow effect. I'm glad I did because these are truly perfectly random XD fairies. It's a stupid joke. But the flat pattern was done and I just needed to warp it into half of our circle skirt, which I did with the warp tool. And once it was a semicircle, now I needed to make sure it was the exact measurements of the skirt I was going to make. So I went into Illustrator and I created a shape that was the exact measurements of the skirt I was making. Took that shape back into Photoshop, used it as a clipping mask on my warped shape, and now I not only guaranteed that my shape was the correct size for the skirt, but also it cleaned up the edges. But now I had the round and flat versions of my forest pattern, and I had to get it ready to print. Most of the time when you get something printed on Spoonflower, you're gonna be looking at a repeating pattern, but I'm gonna be utilizing something else it can do, large scale printing. If you were doing a repeating pattern, most of the prints you can buy on Spoonflower are just repeating patterns. You'd have a small image that you'd upload to the system, and then it would repeat that pattern all across the fabric for you. But as long as that image fits within the width of the fabric, you can actually print it as big as you want. And that is how we're gonna get our circle skirt. To get it ready for print, you can do this in any program. I'm using Illustrator, but we wanna make a canvas that is the width of our fabric by the length of yards that we're gonna buy. So for me, that's 42 inches by 144 inches, which is 4 yards. In pixels, that is a whopping 6,300 by 21,600 pixels. It's a big image, but I loaded up my canvas with both halves of my circle skirt and enough of the repeating pattern to get a bodice out of, and some extra in case I inevitably messed it up. Know yourself. But I'm about to make every graphic designer cringe because Spoonflower actually has an image size cap, and while you can upload a picture that's as big as you want, it needs to fit within those megabytes. So to get my massive image in there, I had to save it as a 150 dpi reduced quality JPEG. I know, sinful, but it worked to get it in there. And when you first upload it to Spoonflower, it won't look right, but switch it to the fabric you chose and the yards you need, and bam, there's your design. But it was ready and I had tested it in the system, and so I sent it off to them and waited with bated breath to see if all the work I did was even worth it. And it was! They loved it. And a couple weeks later, it came. Oh my god. Oh. Holy sh. Whoa. Okay, it printed weird, but the skirt is there. Hopefully there's actually 2 skirts. There's one there and then there's one there. Sick. I have to admit though, I was stunned by this fabric, and I knew that I had to do my very best now to make this a very nice dress, because if done well, this may turn out to be one of the prettiest things I've ever made. Holy moly! But after all that effort to even get it onto my living room floor, making the dress was actually the easy part. The skirt is straight up already marked out, so I didn't even have to think about it. And I cut my bodice pieces out wherever I thought they'd look pretty. I didn't try to pattern match or anything. To get rid of any and all raw edges, I bag lined the whole thing with green cotton broadcloth. Flat lining is when you sew your lining and fashion layers together and treat them as one, but bag lining is when you sew your lining and fashion layers independently, essentially making the whole garment twice. But then you can sew them together, right sides together, which gives you a nice clean edge and fully encases your raw edges. I'm only sewing them together around the neckline, so I have a nice clean edged neckline and no visible seam. But I left the back open to make room for a nice, stretchy shearing panel. You can do shearing in a few ways. If you have a machine that can handle elastic thread, you can do it that way with a zigzag stitch. But this way just involves several channels sewn into 2 pieces of fabric and elastic, so it's pretty easy. First, I marked out several lines on the lining piece. Then I sewed down all those little lines I marked. I should have finished the top edge first before I did any of that, so I ended up having to top stitch it, but finish your top edge first before you start sewing in the channels. But I left the bottom edge as is because it's going to get serged with the rest of the waistband seam allowance. Then I fed elastic into each channel and sewed it down on one side. To do the other side, I have to stretch it out first and keep it stretched as it's sewn down. This scrunches up the panel, which allows the whole panel to stretch, which should give you enough room to get into the dress without a zipper. So I thought the shearing would mean I would be able to get away with not having a zipper, but I was wrong. I could get it over my head, but I absolutely could not get it like over my hips. So she needs a zipper now. So I unpicked this seam, so the zipper will go here. But now my concern is with the skirt. I wasn't super worried about like where the middle of the pattern would be when I designed it. But now that I'm looking at it, I can't decide if like the natural spot that the print wants to sit is like, I'm cool with that because it's not really centered, or if I want to cheat it a little bit and have this one in the center, because then there's like 2 more upwardy ones closer together, but then the seam is like closer to the front. I don't know. I don't think it super matters because it's a circle skirt. The print itself like falls onto itself. So you really only see that when I like hold it up. And even then, I don't think it looks that weird. I think I might just put the seams where they naturally should be on the sides. But I really like it. Look at her. The skirt is so pretty, and it's gonna lose a little bit of length, but I really like it. I'm really excited for the sleeves. I still need to cut those out. Let's do that. I wanted some cute chiffon sleeves. The thing is though, chiffon is really annoying, and there's a couple things you need to consider before you work with it. It's really annoying to cut. It's really shifty, so you kind of have to be willing to get tilted to even start working with it. It also runs like a bitch if you use the wrong needle or if it's just cranky. It also frays really bad, so you need to keep an eye on those raw edges. And it's sheer, so if you have any raw edges, you will see them on the inside. Though, you can hide and encase your raw edges with a French seam. French seams could kind of be described as double seams. So you do the seam in reverse first, and then encase the raw edges by doing another one. So I'm sewing the sleeves wrong sides together, trimming down the seam allowances, then turning it inside out, and then sewing down the same seam, now right sides together. And you get this little encased seam. This is what you want to use on sheer fabrics like chiffon. Now, you can serge chiffon too, but because of how sheer it is, you will see those serged edges inside. Now, let's do something less annoying and totally worth it, an insert pocket. Insert pockets are just 2 little kidney shapes that get sewn right sides together with each side of the seam and then joined together as one kidney shape that you can then shove into the hole. I have a longer and better explanation in this video. Also, I only did one because by this point I knew I needed a zipper and I did not want to put in a zipper with a pocket. No, I'm not wrapping my brain around that today, thanks. But with my single pocket in, it was time to hem the skirt. I gotta admit, the skirt's lined pretty weird. Normally for a skirt, you really just want to flatline your pieces together and hem them normally, but I didn't want a visible seam on the bottom, so I bag lined it with broadcloth. This gave me some trouble though, because I cut the lining circle skirt a little too big, so there are a couple places where the lining is bunched up or gathered in weird spots, but I don't mind because now there's no visible hem. The skirt was pocketed and lined, and so it was time to attach it to the bodice, which I did by pinning it all the way around and then straight stitching it in. And then came the worst part, the zipper. There's a little hack I've seen before where you can put your zipper in upside down, and supposedly it is easier to zip that way. So I wanted to try that for this dress, but because I hadn't planned for it, I'd already sewn everything together, so I had to finagle my way around pinning the zipper right sides together with one side of the fashion layer and avoiding the lining for now. So to get it in, I sewed it right sides together on one side, unzipped the zipper, pinned it to the other side, sewed that side right sides together. Then once it was attached to the fashion layer, I top stitched in the lining by folding it, pinning it in, and running a straight stitch near the zipper. It was more annoying than it needed to be, and I don't actually think this is how you install a zipper with a lining. I have to admit though, the upside down zipper is great. I'm using this hack forever. It makes it way easier to zip yourself in. Probably would have looked better as an invisible zipper, but those, as you know, are the devil, so I didn't do that. But with the zipper in, the dress was done, and all I had left to do was go out and get some pictures for Spoonflower's blog post. So I went to get lost in the woods. If you didn't already get my hand-fisted references to what this dress is based on, apparently YouTube's copyright system doesn't pick up on some video game music, and I hope that was enough for you to get it. Anyway, I really love this dress. It is themed around one of my favorite locations from one of my favorite games, and I am so happy that I finally got to design my own border print. So thank you so much to Spoonflower for letting me participate in this. And please go check out Spoonflower's blog post to see all the other cosplayers that participated. And if you like this print, it is publicly available on my Spoonflower. If you would like to purchase it and make this yourself, you can totally do that. Full disclosure though, I do get a commission if you buy it, so just so you know. I hope you liked this video, and a big thank you to my big support tier patrons, Claire, Pins, and Snip. I want to end this with how I closed my blog post write-up. I really think this dress shows what Spoonflower can do when you think outside the repeating pattern box. Come on, that's funny. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.